Good morning, folks. It is I, a very sick, kind of in pain, and had too much pizza yesterday during the Super Bowl. So I am not feeling my best today. However, we are going to soldier through, and I want to make this video because this came recommended to me through the YouTube algorithm. I was watching a short, and as I finished up that short, this got recommended as a video about how rare black architects are. And this questions, where are all the black architects, by Grayson X Arch. I'm going to link their page in the description, their channel in the description. Let me make sure this is up real quick. It is not. Okay, now it is. Let's go. Sorry for any background noise, by the way, as always.
No. Hi everyone, it's Grayson and I'm back with another video, although this one's not exactly very fun. It's honestly the whole reason I started my channel. I really want people who might not have ever come across architecture or thought of it as a career option to find it in a more accessible way. And I wanted to make a video about, inequality in architecture. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, and I was researching for another video that was going to be called The Cost of Becoming an Architect, and it just became so stressful to me to think about trying to become an architect or go into this field without the privileges that I have. So I decided to make this video first. So here we go. So if I'm looking down, I'm sorry. It's clear when you walk into an architecture school or an architectural firm that it is a very privileged place. Every architect you learn about in school are all white dudes. Every book we read has been by a white dude. Most of the professors are white men, especially the upper level ones.
Okay, let me kind of stop right there to say, while that is true on the lower level or maybe in the parts of the U.S., in Canada, UBC, MacDill, Ryerson, you have quite a bit of a diverse group of professors / architects who aren't all stuffy old white men. But for the majority of what she's saying, or they're saying, that's very true.
The tenured professors, a lot of them are white men. All the star professors and the ones with all the awards and the ones everyone talks about, they're all white men. And then most of the principals at all the firms are white dudes as well. This is just coming from...
Very true. Now, once again, I'm talking about the United States. In Canada, I have met so many principal architects who are not just minorities, but some indigenous, and a lot of women who are... Now, I could be pulling from a smaller sample size since, I've met the ones from, let's say, UBC, Ryerson, and that alumni ilk. I don't know why I'm calling them ilk, because I think ilk is more of a... I have no clue. But in the United States, I can say very accurate.
My own experience, and I have worked at exclusively large firms. So that might contribute to that because they would have had to been started a while ago, even though things are moving towards more diversity. In the past, they were super white and male. I knew that it was a thing, that our industry is super privileged, but experiencing it firsthand in a firm was really weird. Everyone was super nice and encouraging to me, but it still felt like I was in somebody else's world because every person that I was supposed to look up to was nothing like myself. So yeah. Just as a disclaimer, I am not a history expert. I've taken a handful of history classes, art history, architectural history classes, but I'm definitely far from an expert. Most of these facts I just pulled from Google. So the main architecture school, the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France, was established in 1648. They didn't start admitting women until 1897, so white dudes had like a 200-year head start, which is ironic because the first actual architect, capital A architect, is Imhotep, which was an Egyptian. He is credited with designing the step pyramids, and he would have been black. The first
Very true. Now, there is some discrepancy of what, and I guess we're going to call them black. We could call them, Hebrew, Egyptian. They were black. But we'll give a little bit of ambiguity because everyone is kind of mixed together, that hodgepodge of black and Middle Eastern and Mediterranean. You're black, but we're just going to go with you're black because you would have been getting beat by the sun. So you're black. You're black. You're blackity black and you're black. You're blickety black, black, and you're back because you're black.
School established in the U.S. was MIT in 1868. Paul Williams was the first black architect in America, and he graduated in 1921. So, yet again, another 50-year head start for white guys. But in general, another thing to think about, architecture is expensive. It always has been expensive, and it still is expensive.
Yes, very expensive. Now, I do like that there is some level of a barrier to entry, a little bit, but it should be a little lower than what it is. Example, a lot of the times I do believe that and it doesn't really have anything to do with architecture itself. It has more to do with the college system that we've set up. I did a video, it was more of a short. It was on the difference between certificates, diplomas, and degrees. There's a diploma program in Canada called the RAIC, and it's one of those. It's an advanced diploma, but for the most part, while you're finishing your diploma, you're actually working in architecture, and you're only taking courses. If you look at the syllabus program that RAIC has, and you put it next to Ryerson or UBC or McGill or University of Quebec's architecture program, you're going to be taking a lot of the base architecture classes. They're almost the exact same. The only difference is you're not paying for underwater basket weaving or folk music appreciation or How I Met Your Mother 167. You're not paying for those courses. So you're only paying for the base courses. And that is one of the biggest problems is architecture is already expensive. But when you take in everything extra in the architecture, the supplies, the workload, this, that, and the other, if you're one of the people that have to pay for school, which a lot of, black families have to pretty much do, it then becomes almost unbearable. So, yeah. But once again, that could be said for Latinos. That could be said for indigenous. That could even be said for a lot of whites as well.
Which means that architecture is mostly controlled and run by money and power, which has historically been in the hands of white men for
a really long time.
Before any of these established architecture schools were even a thing, architecture was really just rich dudes being like, I want a cool house, or a tomb, or a place to hold gatherings. And they would have, tons of money and political power and slaves, and it's never been a very democratic industry by any means. And now I'm going to go over some statistics from present day. I'll put links to all the data below. Most of this data is taken from the AIA or NCARB, and some more architectural associations that have more letters in them. But I tried to pull all primary sources from the past at least 2 or 3 years. So 46% of AXP participants and 35% of ARE participants identify as racial minorities. So this means that about 30 to 40% of people who are in the process of getting licensure identify as racial minorities. However, only 20% of new licenses are issued to racial minorities. This could be due to a couple of reasons. There's probably always a small discrepancy between the amount of people who are trying to get a license and then who actually get a license. And also, you could say that the field is growing in terms of diversity. And in the future, those numbers will be more even. But there's still a discrepancy, and it could be due to other factors that I'll discuss. Like I said, there's been a recent growth in licenses issued to racial minorities, but this is mostly from Asian and Hispanic participants. Hi. I'm not saying that's bad, but if you look at the black numbers, it's been consistently 2 to 3% of license issued for the past 5 years, at least as far as this data goes back.
Very true. Very, very, very accurate in what she's saying. I have went to school with a lot of Asian Americans or Asians who came over from Japan, Korea, wherever. So that is fairly accurate, and sometimes I think it is the idea that representation does matter. I know some people would say it doesn't, but if you ever want to understand why I say representation matters, it's because if you look at undergraduate and sometimes even graduate programs between the years of 2008 to 2016, when there was an educated African American president in office, our numbers soared at admissions into undergrad, graduate, and PhD universities. Could it be Barack Obama? Could it be I don't know, but it happened. So
in terms of diversity with black people, it's not really growing. And then just looking at the US population, which is 13% black, 14% of college students are black, which is good. That's pretty much the same as the US population, actually a little bit more, which is great. But if you look at just architecture schools, there's only 5% of architecture schools that are black. And there's only 3% of licensed architects that are black. And that's a huge discrepancy. That's almost 10 percentage points. So why is there this gap? So why are black people not becoming architects? One of the reasons is there's a lack of role models. And in a survey by the AIA, there were 437 minority principals and 8 minority professors. But if you compare that to their white counterparts, there were 1,970 white principals and 78 white professors. So there was...
Oh, hold on. I did something wrong. Okay, guys, I'm sorry. Bear with me for a second.
So there was 450% more white.
Now, like I said, representation does matter. If we don't see ourselves in those roles, we're not going to accept those. We're not going to accept that we could possibly do it. Example, baseball. We knew we could play baseball, but we were going to be on what they would call the Chitlin circuit. You know, Birmingham, Mobile, Pensacola, New Orleans, well, not really New Orleans, but Slidell, all the black areas, quote unquote, the black areas. If we did go into other areas, those were the sundown areas. If you don't know what a sundown town is, I'm gonna let you Google it, but I have been to some sundown towns that are still sundown towns. Pace, Florida, I'm looking at you, but okay. If you don't see yourself in that role, or if you don't see people that look like you in those roles, you're not going to believe you can get those roles. As a matter of fact, Steve Harvey, I don't really like Steve Harvey like that much anymore, but he always tells a story, and it was confirmed by some of his old classmates, where he told the teacher he wanted to be on TV, and the teacher pretty much said, "Do you know anybody on TV?" And of course, only Bill Cosby, but Are you Bill Cosby? No. Well, now Steve Harvey is on TV. He's on the radio. He's on the internet. He's writing a dumb book. I'm sorry. I mean, he's writing a book. But if you don't see yourself there, you're not going to be there. So that's why having black architecture professors and black architecture principals are so important.
White principals than black principals, and there is 975% more white professors than black professors.
Like, this is just from one study.
That's crazy. Like, that's bad. Another reason is because black architects feel like they are less encouraged to develop professionally. They're less likely to get hired, and they're less likely to be promoted than their white counterparts. And those are just perceptions that the AIA took in their survey. But if you look at the actual salaries, in a salary range between $25,000 and $50,000 a year, those salaries are more likely to be held by racial minorities. But if you look at salaries $50,000 a year or more, those are more likely to be held by white people. So there is quantitative data that says that white people tend to get paid more. There could be many reasons, but this could lead into the general perception of how minorities and black people feel in the field. The last reason why black people might not enter the field of architecture or stay in it is that it's not an economically viable option for a lot of people. There's a high barrier to entry. You have to go to school. You have to do all this experience and ARE tests, and those cost money. And I'm gonna break it
I'm gonna let her break that down.
down in another clip. I'm just gonna go through this spreadsheet because I love spreadsheets. Okay, the real cost of architecture, and this is like the best case scenario or the worst case scenario, depending on how you look at it. Like, this is gonna say you take the cheapest option and you're really frugal, like you don't do any special fancy things, but also at the same time you don't have any help from like your parents or scholarships or financial aid other than a loan. So first up, we got tuition. The cheapest way to get through architecture school is to go to an in-state public school for a 5-year bachelor. It comes to a yearly cost of $10,184 for 5 years, which adds up to $50,920. Next up is rent. So I chose to just do Austin rent because I'm familiar with it. I estimated you could get about $650 a month for rent, which is pretty cheap, but I did that. I lived with 5 roommates. It wasn't the best, but it was fine. It was a place to live. So that comes to a cost of $10,800 a year for 5 years, which is another $54,000. First year, supplies for architecture. The first semester, you'll probably have to buy a $1,000 kit, and then the second semester is probably only going to be $100 just for materials and stuff. And then the following 4 years is probably about $200 each year for materials and flooding and stuff like that. You're also probably going to have to buy a laptop if you don't have one that is good enough to handle all the architectural softwares. One I got was $2,000. You can probably search around for that. I'm not a super tech expert, but I know they can definitely get way more expensive than this, and you can probably find something way cheaper that might not be as good. Gonna need Adobe, at least Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. Those are the ones people use. I literally just looked up these Adobe rates. So for the first year, for the student license, it's $20 a month. Every year after that is $30 a month. Every architecture student that I've talked to all uses Rhino. Thankfully, it's only a one-time purchase. This is the student price of $195. And then NCARB, which is the organization where you can log your experience hours and register to take your ARE tests, which is how you get licensed. The first year you register, registration fee is $100, and then every year after that is $85. I'm going to make an assumption that you can do it in 6 years, which again, I don't know if that's super possible. I'm assuming the scenario is that you're really on top of your game. You're going to get it done in 6 years. And then the ARE tests you have to take, those are required tests to become licensed. They're $235 each. There's 6 of them, and if you have to retake any of them, it's another $235. But like I said, I'm going to assume that you are really on top of your game and you pass every one on your first try. And then finally, to get licensed, you have to register for it. That's $1,100. And then every year after that, to maintain it, it's $225. But by this point, this is where I stop because you are now licensed and you're an architect. This comes to a grand total of $113,730,
which is a whole lot. Now, I think she did that for she did that for the 5-year program. If you don't have the 5-year program at your school in state, and you have to do the 4+2 or 4+3, which is 4 years of undergrad and then 2 or 3 years of a master's program, that can blow you out completely. If you can't get cheap rent because your state, or you can't find roommates, or anywhere to live, that really does eat into that as well. So I'm gonna let her finish though.
crazy. I'm gonna go down here. I have an example monthly budget. So if you took out a federal subsidized student loan that wouldn't start accruing interest until you got out of school. So if you want to pay that off by 35 in 12 years, this is the actual federal interest rate right now. These are just numbers for math. You'd have to make a monthly payment of $1,025 for 12 years to pay off your entire loan. So getting more into the monthly budget, we're going to assume that I make $50,000. That's pretty standard, a little low, depending on what location. Federal income tax, I calculated. And then in Texas, there's no state income tax. This is assuming that this person would be working in Texas. If you take your income minus your income taxes and divide it by 12, you get your monthly income. So that's $3,595. Rent, let's assume you move out of your 6-bedroom house for $650 a month and you upgrade to an $1,000 a month apartment. That's pretty reasonable. It's still kind of on the cheap end, but you're not living in a shoebox. Then there's your student loan payment, and then for retirement, say you want to have $1.2 million by the time you're 65, which gives you 42 years, assuming you're investing it in like a Roth IRA or in the stock market, which generally returns about 8% each year. You would only have to put away $291 a month. Transportation, a monthly bus pass in Austin is $42, and say you want to have a car because the bus system in Austin is, it's better than most places in America, but it's still really bad. You're probably going to want a car, buy a used $15,000 car, pay it off in 5 years. You have to pay $285 a month. Plus, I'm going to say I spend $15 a week in gas, which comes to a car and gas payment of $345 a month. Utilities, water, electricity, trash, and gas, I estimated about $200 a month. Phone and Wi-Fi, this is the exact price that you can get phone and Wi-Fi from AT&T right now. It's $44 a month. Subscriptions, we got Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Adobe, because I don't want to sit at home and just look at a wall. Plus, I probably still need Adobe. That's about $50 a month. Health insurance, I estimated $200 a month. Renter's insurance, $30 a month. Food, $50 a week, which comes out to $200 a month. And then entertainment and shopping, an average about $40 a week, which is $160 a month. And I'm left over with $7. Yay.
Now, once again, there's always ways to there's always some level of a way to kind of chip away at that. I know some people move back. The one of the videos I think that we did, the lady moved back in with her parents. She took on extra work, which can be done, but sometimes there is no extra work. Sometimes you don't have a good relationship with your parents, and you have to go this route. Sometimes you can't find a job that will pay for your school right away. You have to probably stay there for a year or two, which is still pretty good, but it does give you some skin in the game. But it's still, even then, you may not find that job and you have to pay everything out of pocket. And of course, I do believe that the way it should be is it should be modeled more like a 15-year mortgage, not the way it is now. You shouldn't be paying for 15 years on your education and you owe more than what you even took out in loans. So there's always that. There are so many layers to what I'm trying to say, but at the same token, she's breaking this down beautifully.
But in general, it's not a very lucrative option for a career. Architecture is filled with bureaucratic bullshit. And most of this is rooted in centuries of white male privilege. Honestly, it's a shitty option for black people if you just look at the numbers. It's going to be very difficult to improve your socioeconomic standing through architecture. Just go be a coder and make loads of money. That said, I think we still need to encourage black people to enter the field of architecture. We need black architects. The field suffers tremendously from a lack of black architects and unique designers of different backgrounds. So here's a very simplified example. If there's a predominantly black community and a company wants to move their headquarters there, therefore bringing along more jobs, more people, raising the rates of rent, and pushing local businesses out, who do you think is better qualified to design that building, that public space? It's really not a question of if it should be done in the first place, because let's be honest, we live in a capitalist society. If you say no to a project, someone down the road will definitely say yes, and it will be done. As an architect, you can't control that, but if you design it, you have the control to do it right. Hopefully. Would you rather have another old white principal, or even someone like myself, who is a person of color and a woman, but who has benefited my whole life from white privilege, or would you rather have a fellow black person who has a better understanding of how you could add economic development to an area without destroying the community and culture who's already there, who has a stronger empathy for people in that situation? This is a question you have to think about a lot as a designer, and there are kinds of projects that I do not feel qualified to do because I do not have the cultural background to do it justice. And I think more architects should think like this. If you want to do...
While I do agree, I also agree the best person for the job is the best person for the job. Whether that person is black, white, indigenous, any form of Asian. If you're the best architect or the best engineer for the job, if you're the most educated and have the most work experience, then great. Would it be great to have just a black architect work in black communities? Yes, but is it always the most logical? No. But having a black representation there, showing the kids that you too can be an architect, will also allow them to dream, hey, I want to design buildings too, and I don't just want to be the guy that's holding the hammer. There's nothing wrong with holding the hammer. I took that from Fraggle Rock. Not every Fraggle has to pick up the hat or the hammer. Some could pick up the pen. Yeah, that was a very powerful message right there. Shout out to Jim Henson, rest in peace. But it would be cool to have a lot more black architects and black engineers in our communities. But at the same token, I also want the person who's most qualified to do that job as well. Whether they're black, white, indigenous, Asian, Australian, or even Martian. Because let's be honest, Martians got underground cities. They beat us all.
What is best for society and people, then you should have the same answer. There are plenty of other projects in the world for you to do. Don't freak out. If you're a black person and you're up to the challenge of architecture, it's hard for everyone. It's going to be harder for you. I'm sorry about that. I can only try to change the atmosphere that we're in, but it's going to take a lot of little changes and little actions from hundreds and thousands of people across the globe to change systemic racism. It can't happen overnight. But if you're up to the challenge, I strongly encourage you to do it. Because we need you. We desperately need you. I want to work with you, and I want to help you create a better future.
Well, thank you for wanting to work with me. I really just want to be a draftsman. And that right there could also be one of the reasons why there's not a lot of black architects, is because sometimes we branch off into other having an architecture degree doesn't automatically mean you have to go into architecture. You can go into graphic design, you can go into set building, video game design, world building, you can go into jewelry design. Even within architecture, you could be a draftsman, you could be an inspector, you could just be the person who runs and get the the coffee, but you can do site prep, site planning. There's so many other jobs in architecture, and sometimes we'll take those jobs because we just say, you know what, especially when you understand you have to get 3,740 hours just to even have your license, and then take a test 6 times. Well, one test, but 6 different divisions. And if you fail any of those parts, you got to take that test again. And now, even though it doesn't mean you're dumb, the test is really hard. Sometimes it can get a little discouraging. That's all I can say. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this one up. We're already at 30 minutes. Geesh. Go like Grayson X Arch. I'm going to link their channel in the description. And I really hope each and every one of you have the absolute best day possible.